welcome Michael Ciravolo of Schecter Guitars, President and CEO.
Thank you,
How are
man.
you?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I want to get right into it with a question that may be a little different than what you've been asked in the past, but
Love that.
great. So I've been following your career and your music for a while, and I noticed that even with the gnarly schedule, stress, and responsibility I know you have with Schecter, even and you're a family man, so I'm sure it takes up so much time alone. So, and I notice even with all that, still at the end of the day, you're grinding away at your own music. You're in the studio late with Michael, and I love that. I admire that because it takes a certain character to like continuously grind with music, and even with all the other stresses, like you still are doing it. And I really, yeah, I look up to that. So,
Oh, thank you.
so what drives you to keep going?
It's just certainly after working a day job, and believe me, I know I'm blessed with what my day job is. That, a lot of people think it's just sitting around and playing guitar all day. At the end of the day, it is a business, and it's running a business in California and everything. But it's just, it's wanting to create and not allowing yourself to be so far removed from that. And I'm sure and myself too. It's easy to go home, sit on the couch, and what shows tonight or something. And I'm blessed again to have the support of my family. That it's not an issue when I leave. I live close to work and the studio, so that kind of makes it easy to not. Well, it's too far, and it's not finding the excuses, letting that stop. And I think it helps. I mean, to me, with the doing Schecter, and you grow up as a kid loving guitar, and then you have this vision of being this guy on stage, and you peek behind the curtain, and for whatever reason, that's not the path that's put in front of you. But when you start selling for your living, basically we're selling guitars, and it's easy to step out of lose track of why you were in it, and what you loved now becomes a means to support your family. And I find that doing music and going in, having Beauty and Chaos start and everything, has definitely kept me interested in it. And one helps the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so kind of give me like an idea of how do you manage your time day to day? So you're at the office, but then when you're in like, an album stretch, you're writing and recording an album. So you're just kind of like doing, 12, 14-hour days, just grinding through, or do you like go home, take a break, and then come back to the
It
studio or
there definitely times. I mean, the studio is in one of our buildings at Schecter, so it's across the parking lot from
yeah.
my office. And there are, when we were doing the first record, it was going right. 5:01 walking out the door, and 5:02 Michael's already got stuff set up in the studio and everything. I found now that I live 9 blocks from Schecter, so the idea of actually going home for 30 minutes, it's kind of it's been good because it allows me to kind of separate and step out. But it really depends. I'm always give myself deadlines, which Michael Rosan, my partner in Beauty and Chaos, I think it probably drives him a little fucking crazy. But I feel if you don't have a deadline and going, I want to have this finished by this date, because that rolls into mastering, rolls into doing a video, rolls into doing promotion for a release. I think you have to do it. But yeah, it's just scheduling the time, and having the desire to do it. And certainly hearing what comes back over the speakers, and the enjoyment of working with the other artists that we have in Beauty and Chaos certainly is inspiring. It doesn't feel like a job at that point.
And I noticed too with your music, it's very collaborative. You're constantly having different guest vocalists, and I really like that. I really like that in a band and an artist because it really helps you step outside of your zone. You know what I mean? So it's like if you might be used to writing a certain way or producing a certain way or having a certain vibe, but then the second you bring in someone like Whitney or
Oh yeah.
in the past when you I believe you worked with Ashton,
Oh yeah, a
and
couple
it's
of
just like
songs.
it's still you, but it's another dimension of you, and I love that you do that often.
Well, I mean, this whole Beauty and Chaos thing, and I never hate the word project, but it's not a typical band. For a short moment, was going to be, Michael uttered those words that he probably regrets right now. Just turned to me and said, "Why don't you do your own record?" And it's like, yeah. And then the reality of going, okay, I'm not really a singer. So, what is doing a record? I mean, no, I'm not the type of instrumental guitar player that someone's going to want to, I wouldn't want to, I don't listen to guitar albums like that. So, was fortunate that that path turned real quick. It went from a solo album that may or may not ever transpired to just blossoming into something I never could have imagined. And yeah, it's certainly I don't view it as a song until the singer puts their words and melody on it, and it is collaborative. Every singer involved in Beauty and Chaos, they're not handed his lyrics, follow this melody. It's a joy to get that email back and hear what this piece of music soundscape that we've delivered to someone, what it turns into. And I think I've been really fortunate uh, to be able to match what the music in my head. I can kind of go, wow, this will be great with Whitney, or this will be great with Cat or with Ashton. Uh, and, never been disappointed in
Yeah,
what has come back.
absolutely. I think too, when you allow the artists that creative freedom to write whatever lyrics you'd like, write whatever vocal melody and patterns you like to this song, I really feel like that optimizes the song, because I also feel like, when even though it can work and it can create a great song at the end of the day, when say an artist was presented with, okay, these are the lyrics, this is the melody, just sing it kind of like a session
Yeah,
musician,
that's
it changes the vibe for the artist as well. So allowing them to have that creative freedom, I think, is just a win-win.
yeah, I think that's why people enjoy working with it. And we've kind of evolved and changed the way that we work. I mean, we're into it now. Behind the Veil was the third studio album. And when we did the first record, it was kind of, you know, as I wrote each song and sent it to a singer and it came back, I think it was less cohesive. And hats off to Michael for making that record, which was a double record, 14 songs, not sound like some bizarre compilation, but most of the stuff was really finished, musically when we sent to the singers because it was a time frame we were new at it. I think as it went into The Storm Before the Calm and definitely on this new record, I wanted to make it a little bit more like we were working in the room with the singer, even though we weren't. I mean, Elena is in Italy and Cynthia is in Sao Paulo. It was we sent them less music on the first go round, which I think made it more collaborative as maybe the verse chorus wasn't as obvious and there wasn't all these guitar melodies that maybe the singer would feel like they had to latch onto. So we sent a bit more space as we went on, and it allowed Michael and I to add after we heard what the singer where they took it. So I kind of liked the progression of how we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about songwriting a little bit, how do you find yourself when you sit down to write a song kind of defaulting to a specific thing, like you start all songs with acoustic guitar or a melody, or do you find it to change depending on your mood and the vibe?
I'm not trained. I'm certainly not a fantastic guitar player. I don't have a huge chord voicing or a typical way of writing. I find myself inspired by sounds, so I'm, much to my wife's chagrin, there's guitar pedals everywhere and they're in my office. But to me, each little box, when I plug it in, it seems to guide me into a sound and it kind of it develops from that. Sometimes it'll develop from you know playing bass, and I think a guitar player playing bass plays it a little bit different. But on the first record, Bloodless and Fragile started from a bass part, so I think it varies the way we create. And I'm always looking. I did some stuff with different tunings and a couple of weird instruments, like a mandocello thing, which is actually I think where Orion came from. So it's finding something that sparks. I don't know if that's typical, but especially as we move forward, I've got four guitars sitting in my office now that have bizarre tunings. I look into like what Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine did, and just to where I think as a musician, maybe you kind of go to your go-to chords and progressions, and I think the idea of having something that kind of throws the puzzle on the floor, and then when you pick it back up and rearrange it, it hopefully comes out with something different. So as we move forward, I'm looking to that to find the direction to take us something different. Because I mean, you could sit there and do G D A E all day, and they're great songwriters that work within those confines. But I think to keep this interesting, and I'm always looking for that, and hopefully keep finding it.
Yeah, I love that. I do feel like depending on what you pick up, what kind of guitar, what tuning, what kind of synth patch, it totally changes how you move forward with a melody or the structure or so I completely agree with that. I love just trying to throw myself off like by okay, well, what tuning haven't I used yet, or
Yeah.
what maybe change the style of tuning instead of drop D. Okay, I'm gonna do a song in standard or whatever. So I think all of that is a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, when we did that first record again, it was coming. It was I wanted to do something different. I didn't. That I mean, I don't know if if it resonates or matters to many people, but that first record, Finding Beauty in Chaos, there's absolutely not one keyboard note on it. I went into that like very for whatever reason, anti-synth. I didn't want to press a button or have someone, press something plastic and have this stuff came out. So every texture on that record was created with guitar pedals, with effects pedals, EBOs, violin bows, a thing called a gizmotron. I mean, any weirdness that we can get. I have people go, "Oh, that mellotron you played on it, not a mellotron on it." So that part of that record I'm really proud of, and I think looking back now, it's like maybe I was too focused on that, but I think at the end of the day, I look back at it and go, I'm proud of that record. Uh, and one thing about this Beauty and Chaos, my kids will go, "Oh, you got your own record on, Dad." And it's like I've never looked at. I've done records with Human Drama. I've done records with Gene Jezebel, and I found myself because of always having a studio and everything, kind of listening to that stuff differently. Instead of as a listener, I'm listening like, the guitar should have been louder there. I wish I would have did that, and the snare should have been. And so you're listening to it still like you're in the mixing room. I think what's I love about Beauty and Chaos is I sit back and I listen to it as a fan of the person singing. So which allows me to listen to a record that's nearing 5 years old and it still sound fresh to me. So,
Yeah, I think that's another great benefit of having collaboration
oh
and
yeah,
not having, like you're saying, you'd rather have guest vocalists that are amazing singers than try and do it yourself, right? So because it's your project, so you can look at it more objectively, right? So you're hearing it, you have your playlist on at home and then one of your songs comes up and you can listen to it at like a fan because it's a vocalist you really enjoy
yeah,
and
and
it's your music.
that's not I
Yeah.
don't think easy, and that's definitely been a benefit of this. And I know I keep going back to that first record, but there's a lot of I have people like, well, who are you going to get next? I mean, there's some bigger names at least in the goth dark world. Wayne from the Mission, Simon from the Cure, and Robin from Cheap Trick, and somehow we made a record that's got somebody from the Cure, the Mission on this side. We got somebody from Cheap Trick and Ice T, and it's on one record, and it seems to cohesively work. But I knew that would run out, and I knew at some point the names would kind of overshadow, and it would be more like, oh, it's a who's who thing, and we're getting L.A. supergroup, and I knew that was garbage. I mean, that you can't exist off of that. So the idea of finding and I mean this with all respect, lesser known singers, but sure as shit, not lesser talented. I mean, you've been in this business. It isn't always about talent. It's who gets a break, who does, that, so it isn't always somebody that's famous is more talented than someone that's playing a local club. So the idea of bringing in people that didn't have that cachet was, I think, kind of it's definitely a new enjoyment for this for me. And it works both ways because their fan base usually will migrate towards what we do in Beauty and Chaos and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think when you said about, I picked up on this immediately because like I think I listen to music the same way. Like it's a blessing and a curse because, I sit and listen to mixes all day. That's what I do. So, and especially like you've been doing it for so long and I can tell in the way you produce music, you're very technical as well. As long you're very creative and your melodies are great, and what you said about textures, like I totally like love all that. But I get it when you said, "Oh, I wish the guitars could have been louder there, or the snare could have been changed a little bit." So I understand how it is to. It's kind of hard to not listen to music that way sometimes. So when you can finally just let go and just be a fan and be a listener, to me, that's kind of when the mix is perfect or the production is perfect because
Yeah,
you're
but
not hearing it, right?
I'm not sure what you grew up listening to, but I mean, I know as a kid when my sister would play the Beatles in the house, I was young, but even now you don't step back and go, oh, listen to Ringo's snare. You listen to it as a whole. And I think that's maybe it's the mix or maybe it's stepping back and being a listener as opposed to the artist involved. And uh, you know, I the technical end of it. I mean, again, a blessing in Beauty and Chaos is Michael Rosen. I mean, I think the guy is world class, and he's besides pushing me into doing this, he allows me to do that part. And I mean, that guy will sit there and toil over stuff, but the result is fantastic. And I think I don't know if I would. In fact, I know I wouldn't enjoy this if I was also the one sitting behind Pro Tools. I don't have the chops. I've kind of, thankfully almost stepped away from it and forgot a lot of that stuff. I just look at what he's doing. It's like, okay, I'm gonna walk outside and pet the cat,
Yeah.
and come back in, and he's got things lined up, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's definitely I couldn't do this without him, and he pushes me to be better than I think I ever could be. Besides now being a big part of the songwriting of it, so it's definitely collaborative, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and I like what you said about. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this, but when I listen back to some of my favorite records that I loved when I was a kid, I'm hearing them totally differently. I still love them, but I'm hearing all the weirdness about like the mix or the guitars are too loud or too quiet or the snare. But back then, when you're discovering it and you're just feeling, you're getting the vibe and the emotion from it, it doesn't matter,
But
right?
yeah, that the first time you may have 10 mixes of a song, and when whoever the end listener is, that's the mix.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Hey, we have another one that's got this part. I mean, that doesn't have any bearing anymore. It becomes, it may never be in stone to you, but it is
Yeah.
in stone uh, to the listener, and that's kind of the beauty. Like we were talking before, it's almost sometimes it's the curse of recording digitally. Is that I mean, when we were doing human drama and some of our first demos and all, you're doing it on tape. You knew you can only go so many times before they start wearing through the tape and it starts losing fidelity and everything. And the parts, you had to be a little, I think, more critical about what you put down because there was a limit. I
Right.
mean, Pro Tools and whatever digital system anyone's using is the ultimate enabler. It's just, hey, you want more, you want more, you want more. I mean, we've had songs that have had 100 tracks going, and with doubles and things like that, and it's great. But then you kind of smack yourself and go, it's Sergeant Pepper on 8 tracks.
Right. Right.
So it's interesting. I always have a love hate with technology, but I think I know we could not do what we do with Beauty and Chaos, and probably lots of other people, you know, if it wasn't that way, if it wasn't digital zeros and ones, because we've had a lot of stuff done at people's studio in England, Brazil. The other side, Ashton does his stuff in his studio in St. Louis, and it's so that's the benefit. We transfer, different transfer programs and putting logic in the Pro Tools and all that stuff that people probably don't give a shit about, but it does allow this kind of stuff to happen.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I did come up when I started learning about specifically audio, it was right when like tape was fizzling out and Pro Tools was like becoming more mainstream. It was, man, when I was in school, it was like 6, Pro Tools 6. Now we're on 12, and I didn't even learn about tape in audio school when I went. Fortunately, I got to mess around with it after after I was in school
Now
when I
you
was
have all
working
these
at certain
plugins that are trying
studios.
to
Studio,
emulate tape.
right. Now it's like, I mean, I agree with you. I think Pro Tools is amazing because we're able to do anything we want with anyone around the world very quickly, and have an amazing product. At the same time, it can create a lot of um, unnecessary tweaking, unnecessary fiddling. When you have too many options
Yeah.
and unlimited time, you can get to the point where it's like, do we really need 20 takes of this vocal? It's just, you know, usually the first or second one is the best anyway.
Yeah,
So
and punching in, finding that word or something to fix it. But I mean, I came up at I've been involved in mixes that, have had the 24 or 48 track board in the tape on stuff that had 3 different lines. And it's like, hey, when it gets to that part, you're reaching over and you're bringing it up to this line while I pan it to that side. And I look back at that and going, that was had fucking chaotic, but it worked. Now that doesn't have to happen. And like everything, it's good and bad. I've that first record, I put us in a box by going no keyboards. The behind the veil, there was a box of only going, it's just female singers. So I think sometimes some limitation can certainly be an asset. And I've often talked with Michael going, maybe we do something that it's 24 tracks. That is what we get,
I love that.
and
Yeah.
try and work within that confines and see what we come up with.
Yeah, and even today with like even the craziest productions with all the tracks, you could subgroup it down, and that's what big mixers do anyway. Like they have their console and they're subbing it down to 4 to 8 tracks, and it's like, I've got sessions that are easy 200 tracks, and it's just like taking so much time to figure out what's
Oh
important,
yeah,
sub it down. So I think having a restriction to 24 or whatever, like just committing to something, I think that is a huge that makes makes it move along so much faster, and it just creates better results
yeah.
in my
But what
opinion.
you never had to do is go, we're going to put the guitar solo and the shaker on the same track because it doesn't happen at the same point.
Right.
And going,
Yeah.
so when the guitar solo comes in, you need to tweak the EQ and this and that. But I mean, it's it is an advancement, and again, we wouldn't be able to do this, but most of the part, I grew up using ADATs, which was recording on videotape, and just to back it up was real time, and it's rewinding, waiting for stuff to catch up. I mean, that had its own downside and everything, and sonically it wasn't great, but you know uh, it's what you do with it. At the end of the day, it's not technology. There are songs out there that are lo-fi, but it's a great song, and sometimes it's benefit. There's a benefit of it having this hiss and warmth. I mean,
Hmm.
people are doing stuff on cassette again, which
Yeah.
I never thought would come back around.
Yeah, and even there's everyone when you print to a vinyl, as you know, it does add artifacts, it does
Yeah.
add little noise, but it's amazing. It's like that's what you want from a vinyl. Like when you just said that, I wanted to ask you, have you heard of the band Drab Majesty?
No.
Okay, I think you would really really like them because they're psychedelic, kind of new wavy, but they have like a lo-fi sound, but they're very, they're active now, but they do that on purpose, and it sounds amazing. And it's not like the masters aren't super loud. They're very dynamic, and they breathe and they have a little hiss, but it sounds just awesome, and I love that the idea of that.
Well, that's
So,
definitely another thing about, everybody wants mixes to be as loud as possible.
mhm.
So you're in a club,
That's
if,
my world.
you want to sit there and it's like when a Rob Zombie song comes on that's pegged, if you if you're less than that, doesn't sound as good. But I mean, put on a Led Zeppelin. I mean, I didn't grow up loving Led Zeppelin. I was always, a little over my head. I was into the New York Dolls and T Rex and stuff that was way different. But you put on a Zeppelin record now and it goes dynamically, and you hear the hiss of that, and then when it kicks in, it's massive. I mean, no one does that anymore. It's like, things. It is designed to give your ears a little bit of a break, and I think you hear it better if everything, even something quiet, doesn't need to be like
Right.
that. There's that dip and everything, but you know, it mastering is a big thing. Track order and a lot of that stuff's lost now. I spend probably way too much time figuring out what song, or at least what I think should unfold together. It's certainly showing my age, but I loved putting on a record, and that went into this, went into this, went into this. And nowadays people shuffle or just pick one song, and it's like, that's not meant to go behind that, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I could bitch all day, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the middle with that because I love the idea of vinyls and having a very planned out sequence and masters not being insanely loud. But I work primarily in heavy rock, metal, industrial, so it's very very rarely am I able to, like, everyone wants it as loud as possible. So you do what you can, and like, man, I don't know if you heard some of the really modern stuff that's come out in the last 2 or 3 years. Like, there's this extreme metal stuff. There's some what's it, deathcore. There's some
yeah.
deathcore bands that, like, I have no idea how they get the masters so loud. It's like ridiculous, and but everyone expects that. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's definitely an art to it, and there's a technique to it, which I've been learning and I've been getting better at. But there's always like in metal, it's always like more, louder,
But
louder.
usually the
Which I
focus, I mean, because we have a lot of those bands on Schecter's roster, I think
right,
it is the guitar is the main part, and then vocals and thing are
yeah,
secondary to that.
yeah. It's a lot
So you're
of
not worried about, can you hear the nuances in the singer, or can you hear the
oh yeah,
reverb tails? It's like you want the guitar smashing you in the face, and there's the singing, you know, secondary,
right.
or if even that.
Yeah, it's a lot of big, huge guitars, like, on the sides, big kicks and snares right in your face in the center, and everything else is kind of like
Yeah. So
lost. But
big kicks and snare in the center, which
yeah,
is usually where vocals sit. So you
right.
kind of lose that. But
Yeah. But since we started talking about guitar, I think this is a good place to transition into a little bit about Schecter. I learned that you started at Sunset Custom across from Guitar
Guitar
Center back in
Center,
the day, and
yeah. I mean, I worked at a music store in New Orleans. We packed up like the Beverly Hillbillies and moved from New Orleans. It was going to be New York or Los Angeles. We picked Los Angeles. The band were Human Drama, and then everybody had to scatter and get day jobs. And I had worked two jobs. I'd worked at a pet store and a music store. So I was stumbled into working at the what became the Mesa Boogie store. It was Lab Sound, so it was
yeah.
all the tech guys that came in with the massive racks of gear and everything.
Hmm.
And when that store closed, I walked four stores down and put in an application at Sunset Custom, got the job, then later found out, the next week found out it was owned by Mr. Shibuya, who owned ESP Guitars, 48th Street Custom in New York, and owned Schecter. And Schecter was just this little entity in the back room. It had, I knew of Schecter as a kid in New Orleans because I always tinkered with guitars and parts, and let's put those tuners on, and that, all that era of stuff. And it was kind of odd that that's what it was. And, I had this vision it was way bigger, which I guess at the time it was, but it kind of fall into nothingness. And you know, working at a music store while trying to, us trying to get showcase gigs and stuff like that. And it just, I firm believer you're put in some place, and, your path in life. And stumbled as that as the band I was in at that time, got a little popular, got close to being signed, never got it. That this opportunity was presented to me, and it just kind of went from four of us to, I think now we have 60 people working at Schecter. And I'm fortunate. it has been, like I mentioned earlier, that love hate affair with guitar, but definitely on the love path with it again, and I have been for a bit.
So when you said New Orleans, were you born in New Orleans?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Never, I know you're probably going, oh, big music city was that. I think when it's definitely that grass is always greener thing. I always looked to New York as soon as I got into music. I mean, this New Orleans, birthplace of jazz, all that. None of that stuff ever really stuck with me then. Now I could walk to the French Quarter and watch this little kid beating on a bucket upside down and go, there is a magic and something, a vibe that people that come out of New Orleans have. But I always had my eyes towards the Ramones, New York Dolls, the stuff that was coming out of New York, and somehow we moved to Los Angeles. But you know, I love my city more now. I go back and go on. I see this. I see New Orleans. I mean, Los Angeles spread out. New Orleans is more compact. I love the people there, and I miss it. Don't think I'd ever really move back. Sometimes you go back where you're from, and your friends are still doing the same shenanigans you
Hmm.
were when you were 18. It's like, really? Nah, I'm not going to put that in my nose right now. But you know, it is. I'm happy that that's where I came from. Blessed with two fantastic parents that I think raised me right, and I try to parent the way they parented me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you said you have gone back recently to New Orleans?
I went back. God, it was maybe 6 months ago.
Oh,
My
okay.
producer Michael Rozon uh, is playing pedal steel with Jerry Cantrell, so they were doing a show in New Orleans, and they're like, "You should come down." My friend Tyler Bates
Oh yeah.
is
Love Tyler.
Tyler plays guitar and kind of the musical director of the band. I've known Tyler probably 20 years, so we went down there, and of course, being from New Orleans, you get, "Hey, you're the tour guide," so I took some of the band through New Orleans and everything, and through the French Quarter, went to the dungeon and things like that. And I think they really got the vibe of it. And that's actually we had did that. Our last single was we did a version of Concrete Blonde's Bloodletting, and that inspiration actually came from walking through the French Quarter. I kind of forgot how seedy some of those side streets are and everything. And you walk, and there's the old churches, and I think we were trying to find the St. Louis Cathedral, and yeah, you definitely walk down some of those alleys, and this
Yeah.
woman jumped out of this box, and Michael and I both saw it, and it almost looked like a Halloween decoration. It was small, and this woman, a head and a torso came out, and she just
Wow.
screamed, and my head, I was trying to process, that's real, but how is she in this box? And it just went fuck, and we kept walking, and the Concrete Blonde Bloodletting with chorus popped in my head, and I went, that might be kind of cool to do. And we heard like a saxophone as we got closer to Bourbon Street blaring out a club, and it just went, okay, I've been wanting to sing a song, maybe that's it. And that's kind of how that was spurred from the last trip to New Orleans.
Was the dungeon a bar or what is that?
Yeah, the Dungeons is just seedy little bar. If you Google it, Zeppelin was there, Queen. Everybody used to go to that, and it's about the size of your studio. It's got concrete walls, and it's just like it's open late. Well, probably never closes. It's in New Orleans. It's just like a popular where bands go when they get there and tear it up.
Yeah, I have only been there once. It was about 2 years ago. It was during the pandemic. It was when everyone was locked down, but it was a ghost town. Like we went
Wow.
to Xander and I. We went to like the French Quarter, walking around, and I loved it because there were a lot of people, but it was beautiful. I loved it. I really really enjoyed it, and we had a great time. But yeah, I don't know about going there during the Mardi Gras and all
Oh,
that,
it's
but
like you imagine it's like what you can lift your feet and just get carried down Bourbon Street. But the architecture's beautiful. I've always loved the gas lamps and everything that's
yeah,
burning and everything. But I'm actually surprised it was even New Orleans people usually put their middle finger up at everything. Hurricanes. I mean, when Katrina hit New Orleans, the French Quarter didn't get flooded, and most of those places stayed open. You
Really?
know, they're New Orleans is very resilient and resilient people. So I'm
I can see that.
surprised that
Yeah.
the pandemic stopped them.
Yeah. So after starting at Schecter, I mean, and you've been there about how 20 years now?
Fuck, I think it's longer than that. The store was 94 or 95, and then as the store closed, it just morphed into doing Schecter. But I mean, we stumbled into that. You know, the thing that got Schecter rolling again was that era of MTV. We started working with, I knew Robert from Stone Temple Pilots worked with me at that Lab Sound store. So did some stuff with him. I met Jay and Sean from White Zombie, started working with them, stumbled into Jerry Horton of Papa Roach, and those bands just kind of exploded when MTV actually played videos, and it certainly got the name of Schecter going again. I no business school. I'm just a fucking guitar player, but I knew that we couldn't survive off of just making expensive strats. So sat down and sketched out the Tempest, the Avenger, and the Hellcat. Those were the first guitars, taking things from old vintage books, putting trace in paper, grabbing pieces of one and another, and just kind of went. Lucky to have an owner that kind of thought I was crazy, but gave me permission to run, and it's certainly a lot of luck, timing, and everything. But here we are now. So
One of the biggest guitar companies in the world. Like everyone, every single musician I've ever worked with, everyone I know knows Schecter and loves him. So I love him. I use him every day. Fantastic quality. Like the one behind you, the Reaper 7, just awesome, killer. And I was gonna say, like what you said in a previous interview, I believe earlier this year. I really like that you have designed all the models to appeal to almost any musician, not just metal, like you said. So you could have a blues player dig one of your models like all the way to extreme metal. So I really like that you're very innovative with the designs and
I I think, I mean, when I when I was handed the reins of the company, I mean, Schecter was known for just making fender replacement parts. Uh, to me, that was always like an albatross. So when I when I was given the opportunity, I kind of ran as far from that as possible, and just took it into a direction that I wanted it. But now, as I been doing it a bit, I look back and kind of that the history of Schecter with the strats, the tellies, the pickups, and things like that, kind of what I didn't realize, but now I do, handed us an open book. There's almost, because that's where the company started and we took it, the net is way wider, I think, than some of our competitors, which I mean by that. And I think we can try anything and not look like a fish out of water. You know, BC Rich, probably, if they
right.
stray from what they do, I think they get, it's like, what the fuck are they doing? And I think a lot of companies have that. And I think Schecter wasn't saddled with that. I mean, not a lot of companies can do the coupe and then a Hellraiser 9 string.
Hmm.
I mean, or have Morris Day and the Time and a Both,
Hmm.
on the same
Right.
roster. So it took me a while to realize that, and now I kind of go, that was certainly a blessing. Something I really thought was a bad thing that I tried to act like that never happened. Turned out to be something that allowed us to really have an open book. And I think the analogy, probably stupid, but if we set this up with all the Schecter models and it was a music store, you could probably satisfy almost anybody that walked in.
Right.
Like, yeah,
Absolutely.
we got
Yeah.
something for you. And, it's hard to do that. It's hard to stay innovative with that, but we've managed. I have a great staff. Most people that work at Schecter are musicians, and I love that. I love the fact that, you know, any given day you walk in, Zach Wiles there, or Sinister Gates or somebody, and they we've become friends with them. I think because we still play. It isn't like you walk in. You see my office. You don't walk in. I'm in a dress like this, And I think that where some people probably look at it is that it's not ultra professional. Just fuck that. I mean, it's like if we're all musicians, you relate to a musician far more than somebody in a suit,
Oh yeah,
or
I
something
I
like.
think
I
that's
would
a yeah that's
never
a
do that. And I think when they talk with people at the company, from in shipping to the setup department, they're passionate about what they do. I mean, I've always, when we have the rare company meeting, I just always go, let's treat, don't remove yourself from the kid being the person on the other side of the counter. Treat people the way you want to be treated. You can't make everybody happy, especially in the day of the internet where people love to bitch before trying to be helped. But I think you just treat people how you want to, and you win most of those.
Yeah, and I think that factor that everyone is very, very friendly. Like the vibe, like when I went to the Christmas party, like everyone was very friendly. Like it's a family, and I think that
There's
that's
a lot
as
of alcohol at that.
yeah, well, like there should be at a Christmas party, but especially a Schecter Christmas party full of musicians, so that makes sense. But yeah, I think that's a fantastic part of uh, a company is to everyone feels at home and like everyone is appreciated equally and like it's family. So I think
Yeah,
that's a great move
I
for sure.
I appreciate that, guy. I really strive for that. That we, you don't alienate people. I think everybody there knows they can talk to me. I'm just a guy that happens to be the one that has to make the final decisions on stuff. But I do value and appreciate everyone that has come through our door and works there. I know we're in California. It's not the easiest place to live. I mean, everything's expensive here, and like that. So we do our best there. Uh, and again, I'm fortunate to have an owner who is hands off. Maybe it wouldn't have been the case if we would have made more mistakes, but we've managed to take something little and turn it into something. I mean, I step back and sometimes go, we're looked at now in the same breath as some of the big guys.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
uh, it's no longer like this little who Smecter, or whatever. How it get, Sketcher guitars. It's actually known, and that's cool. I think whenever I decide to not do this anymore, and I feel like I'm out of touch, uh, I'm certainly handing it to the next person in a much better condition than when I picked it up, and that's guess what you can a good thing to do.
Yeah. So are you when you say you make the final decision at the end of the day, I was wondering, are all the designs for all the guitars, do you have a team that comes to you with an idea or are you sketching them and you're like, no, it's this is what I want, or
It,
is it
It's
collaboration or
definitely a
okay.
collaboration. We in the beginning when it was only me, it was me bouncing it off and having my luthier Tetsu at that point and Shigeki kind of go, "Oh, is this what you're thinking?" Yeah, no. Now it's definitely a collaboration. I mean, you mentioned a Reaper. That would have been never anything I would have done. I'm far more the retro style guitars, and I I I feel like at least I'm smart enough to know to let somebody stylistically that's into that style, bring that to the table, and I'll have my input. Like, you sure we should do this? Maybe we should do this pickup or this inlay, but the body styles, and I like to think we keep current. I mean, I don't. I'm thankful that we don't just keep recycling the same three body styles. Again, I'm always all about like that would be boring. I don't know if I'd want to do it if it just turned into, you know, like no knock to Fender, but you keep redesigning. This is a Strat, this, and what we've done, this is that, or this is a Telly, and what we've done is now we have a pickup in the middle. It's a new model. We get to try stuff, and I think it is for being that mid-level company and not having a owner or a board of directors to answer. We can try something. Everything's not a hit. We can get in, kind of get out. That didn't work. Let's try something different. Let's try this model. I know we did the Tempest 2 years ago like this. It kind of didn't do well. Now let's modify it. But yeah, I have a good team of people.
Yeah, I think it's really smart that, like you said, even though the Reaper might not be something you would play or design like as an ideal guitar for yourself, but you have a team that is like you're keeping very well keeping up with the trends, and I think
Yeah,
that's extremely
you have
important.
to. I
Yeah,
mean,
to stay relevant. And
everything with guitar, it's still Tellys and Les Pauls and Strats are still popular. Those are 75 years old, but it's finding that new thing, and it isn't always a crazy shape, because that always doesn't work. It's staying up on colors. We look to the car industry a lot at what's popular there. We've actually looked at clothes and makeup and going, this is colors. That looks like shit on this guitar, but let's try it. So it's just kind of it's a different world. It's just trying to bring in those elements. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a guy and a girl, or a guy or a girl on stage. Does the guitar look good, sound good, play good?
yeah, so anything before we wrap it up, anything you want to plug, maybe music or anywhere people can visit to check out the guitars and the music?
Well, schechterguitars.com, we've really tried to keep the website up to date, have a great media team that we're doing lots of stuff on Instagram and keeping that with sound clips. We have a facility now and a whole floor dedicated in the building that we do a lot of in-house video. Great team. Ben and Adam and Rachel do a wonderful job with that. It's set up to really do, guitars rotating, great sound demos and things like that. They have a great section of dealers. I think we're hard on our dealers. We really want them to represent the line and treat customers well. I think we have a great customer service team. That really tries as much as they can with people yelling at them, "Where's my guitar? This," and they keep a cool head and realize, people are people. And as far as the band, my Beauty and Chaos thing is beautyandchaosmusic.com. You know, I think we do that well too. You can dive into the albums. The lyrics are really important to what we do. You click on an album cover, it unfolds to who's on it, lyrics, who played on it, and also I always with that stress if you hear a Beauty and Chaos song, you like the singer, dive down into them because they all have an amazing catalog of music, and it's just as I love just as much as someone accolates to what we did here that they'll write and go, "Hey, I just heard Whitney's. Never knew who she was. That record's great. I never knew Holy Wars, or this Ashton guy's got an amazing voice," and that's wonderful that it kind of spiders into that. The web kind of goes out.
Absolutely. And amazing work on the latest record. I love it. I think it sounds fantastic. The everything about it is just killer. So great job on
Well,
that.
thank you. Definitely start with 6 really talented, diverse singers and Michael, and I implore you to have him on. I think he'd be a great interview.
I'd love
And
to. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I
thank you,
appreciate
man.
you coming by, and
Definitely.
lovely talking to you. And I
Same
can't
here, my
wait to
friend.
see the new Schecters for 2023 and hear new Beauty and Chaos
Yeah,
music.
we should
So
have if all goes well, there'll be a new Beauty and Chaos single out late March, early April.
awesome.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Michael.